Brilliant. So can all of you see the screen all right? Thumbs up. Yeah. Good. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the caveat is that this is a sector analysis, but of course we don't have data for all the sector until, in September when it's published by the regulator. However, this year we got, I think, the highest number of submissions, which is really encouraging. So we have 125 organizations that submitted data. We had 2 more coming in the last couple of days. So those ones have not been included yet because the slides were already made. So we are up to 127 organizations. And you can see there, 97 are RSLs and 28 are local authorities. Out of the 125, we also had some 57 voluntary-ish submissions. So that again is very useful. So if you haven't sent us your ARC return, you can still do that. We are going to process the ones as they come, and that means that your data is uploaded into our comparison tools, and then you can just make your own bespoke comparisons and look at the data in a more granular way. So just as a quick overview for the sector, we could see that in general, not just for satisfaction, but in general, the performance has been very stable. So we're going to be looking at some graphs that show variations. So you will see some increases and decreases. Some of the graphs look a bit like, wow, that's a big drop. But when you really look at the axis, you can see that we are talking maybe about one point or sometimes even less than that. It's just obviously because we are looking at data that perhaps are in the 80s or 90s is the best way to display that. So we're looking at things with a magnifying glass. So bear that in mind. In terms of repairs and maintenance, in general, again, we could see that emergency repairs are completed faster, and non-emergency repairs in general as well, particularly for RSLs. For LAs, non-emergencies, they're taking them longer. Satisfaction is also quite interesting in terms of the variances. Overall, you will see some organizations that had significant drops, but then overall the performance is stable. There is also improvements and more work done to meet SHQS and ISH, particularly among the RSLs. And there is also improvements in relation to gas safety. For access to housing, a slight decrease in tenancy sustainment rates for RSLs, and the percentage of lets to homeless people remains very much the same as in previous years. So for RSLs, for example, RSLs are not quite, shifting above 39%. Rent arrears performance is also good. Landlords are working really hard to collect rents. Former tenant arrears have increased, particularly for local authorities. And in terms of voids and relay times, that's also an area that shows some interesting variations. So without any further ado, I'm just going to move on and just show you the slides for satisfaction initially. Let me just see if I can make that screen bigger. So again, we are looking at increase in tenant satisfaction. It's perhaps more pronounced for local authorities. But again, we're talking, as you can see, I think if you look at the table, you can see that it's very marginal increases, but it's good. It's showing beginning to show a trend, a positive trend. You will see also in that graph, which I find very useful, that there are some organizations that have shown a significant drop in tenant satisfaction. And I should have said, out of the 125 organizations that we got data from, 55 have carried out a new survey. So we are looking at those 55 organizations and see if there has been any shift. Interestingly, the organization that showed the highest improvement or increase in satisfaction rates, it's a local authority, and the one that showed a significant decrease in satisfaction, it's an RSL. Satisfaction with provision of information or tenants being informed about decisions is dropping slightly. And I wanted to see if I can show you. I'll show you at the end something that we are piloting that might be able to help us analyze that further. But I'll show you that, and I will come back to that in one of the slides at the end. Sorry, I've just jumped into that. You can see significant variations for some organizations in this indicator. Satisfaction with the quality of home, again, for these 55 organizations shows a positive trend. So again, that is encouraging, slightly higher for RSLs than for local authorities. But it seems that the organizations are all working hard. Something happened there with the screen. I don't know. Let me just try again. Can you see my screen?
I think you need to share your screen again, Max.
Yeah. Let's try again. There we go. Yeah. So this is where we were, kept informed, the variations with the opportunities to participate, quality of home. That's an interesting one. You can see that there is a drop in satisfaction with the repairs. But again, looking at the table, you see that it's a small drop. It's just because we are looking at this indicator with a magnifying glass, so it seems like a big drop. However, there is obviously a decreasing trend over the last 5 years at least in satisfaction with repairs. I wonder whether you have any thoughts on that. Why is the case? If anybody wants to offer any comments about that, what are the struggles? What might be some of the factors that might be influencing that? Bearing in mind, obviously, this is a data for those 55 organizations that, well, not really actually, because this is an indicator that landlords do. So we do have data for more than the 55 because it is done reactively. So it's pretty, up to date. Any thoughts on that? Anybody wants to share? Ask questions, discuss.
There's a comment in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Can you see it?
If you could, yes, I'm trying to look at the comments as well. I'm trying to look at a slide on my head.
Bianca Colbert, and it's transactional versus large-scale satisfaction surveys. Due to low transactional responses, we had to use large-scale, which is 2 years old.
Good. Okay, yeah. I've noticed when I was looking at the data that some organizations have used large scales for this indicator, but in general, I think the majority are doing it transactionally. And it is what it is, obviously. Sometimes there's lots of other factors, and that's why at the end, of the presentation, I'd like to show you some of the further analysis that we're doing around some indicators, whether that will show some insight in the future. We can see, but we see that there's a huge range in terms of responses. You know, some organizations show a big drop in satisfactions, but then there are others where the satisfaction has increased in relation to, in particular, to local authorities, and that's a local authority there, so that's interesting. Likewise, management with neighborhood, again, slight decrease, but I like to put things into perspective. And although, as I said, the graph shows a decreasing trend, the decrease is very gradual, but it is going, you know, down. So it's good for us to think what's happening, what could be influencing that. Value for money has increased for local authorities, and it continued to decrease for RSL. So overall, for the sector, it is decreasing. The perception that tenants have about if their property represents, or the services they receive represents, good value for money. And the graph again shows you, based on those 55, where there's been variation and how significant it's been. Interesting, one organization recorded an increase, you know, of over 33%. So that's interesting, perhaps, to see. You can do all those comparisons. You can look at organizations and you can look at peers using our comparison tools. So we're trying to keep this presentation really top level without, you know, going into discussing, you know, particular organizations or areas. So we're just keeping these comparisons top level. As you know, in general, satisfaction with factoring services tends to be quite low. Some of the numbers of factor properties are also small numbers, so I take the performance for factoring with a pinch of salt as well. You know, if organizations have only a small number of factor properties, you know, comparing those percentages with other ones that have more sometimes is not entirely useful, I think, but for local authorities that have factor properties, the performance is increasing. So overall, I think that local authorities have seen an increase in satisfaction performance. Complaints. Complaints, as you know, RSLs tend to record more complaints. I don't think it's particularly a case that they receive more complaints. They might have perhaps a more stringent method of recording complaints. These complaints obviously are just complaints about housing services for local authorities. No other complaints are included, but there is a decrease for RSLs and an increase in the number of recorded complaints. I think that the next slides are a bit more.
Max, Paul McLean's got his hand up.
Yeah, Paul.
Sorry, yeah, Max. Where's the evidence to say that RSLs record more complaints than local authorities? Because I can't imagine that's the case, because we get thousands. And in relation to housing complaints, we're into 4 figures. So where's the evidence in that to say that?
Yeah, perhaps I should have been maybe more. The evidence is entirely, you know, based on my experience when we validate data. It's not that they record more. It's perhaps it could be that they receive more, but when looking at the way things are handled as complaints, I have seen in practice, you know, by validating data and looking at how complaints are recorded, that sometimes some RSLs, because especially the smaller ones, they will record minor dissatisfactions. You know, if somebody, for example, will phone and say, that they had a repairs appointment and the contractor didn't turn up, that will be treated as a complaint, while for other organizations it will not be recorded as a complaint. You know,
well, in some, yeah, I mean, I take what you're saying about something seemed to be a request for service and others are a complaint. I mean, we have that issue as well. I mean, I often think that when I see some of our complaints, I wouldn't have classed it as a complaint, it's a request for service. But I just think it's a bit strange to say that, well, RSLs do X and our local authorities do Y, when I don't see the evidence that we will have to follow a similar process from the Ombudsman in meeting sort of various targets. So I think it's quite a strange thing to say, that's all.
Well, yeah.
Max Allen's put a comment in the chat as well, which kind of just picks up on what you are talking about.
Would you mind reading it?
Yeah, so Alan says, I think partly it's the way that the ARC indicator is asked. Thinking of the last repair you received, how satisfied were you with the repair? Based on all the repairs for 24-25, we had a 96% satisfaction, but this includes multiple repairs for the same property. We used the results for this year's customer satisfaction survey, which asked the questions the way it is written in the ARC and had a 90% satisfaction. So sometimes it's the way the questions are asked and the way people are recording things.
Yeah, but that's about repairs. That's not about
But that's
complaints.
about repairs, yes. That's fine. That's about the satisfaction of repairs. But I do take your point, Paul. I apologize if maybe my comment wasn't very accurate, but based on practice and particularly around, and you're absolutely right, it's around requests for services. Some organizations will record something as a request for service, but if there was an expression of dissatisfaction, I'm not talking about somebody calling to report a repair, but if somebody, for example, has reported something and somebody didn't turn up, it wasn't done right, that tends to vary how some organizations record that, and some RSLs, particularly smaller ones, are more able to record or are more used to recording things like that as these minus dissatisfactions or expressions of dissatisfaction as a complaint that is resolved, obviously at stage one. But again, okay. I should be more careful maybe in the way that I word it.
Okay, I don't want to hold the meeting up.
Yeah. Okay.
Max, another couple of comments in the chat. So Alana says that CLOC processes dissatisfaction as a complaint and our results always look higher than peers. Bianca says that SPSO model complaints handling procedure where clearly shows the difference between a complaint and a service request.
Yeah. That I do agree with that, absolutely. But in practice, the way things are treated sometimes, when you look at how that is handled and recorded, we see, and I have seen great variances, in the way it's done. For stage 2 complaints, well, I don't want to talk you through everything that you can read there in the screen, but you see for local authorities, there's been an increase, a bit more significant than in the other categories. And I think the next slide, or the other slide, let me see if it's this one. Yes, this is also useful because it shows you the average time to respond to complaints. You have the SPSO targets at the bottom, and you see that overall RSLs are able to meet the targets, considering they are also recording, a higher number of complaints. Anyone wants to share anything? Any views on that? We move on to the next one. Okay. That looks, that indicator in particular, sometimes I had some questions about this indicator, but it looks at an average number of complaints per 100 homes and the time to respond. And it's showing something similar to the previous slides in terms to the average times that RSLs are meeting the target overall, as I said, we're talking at the sector in general, and LAs are finding it more difficult to meet the SPSO targets.
Another comment in the chat, Max, from Shirley. We record service requests and inquiries separately from stage 1 complaints. Sometimes these may escalate if not dealt with, but most can be resolved.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Shirley. In relation to SHQS, again, you can see how there are improvements. There's a lot of hard work in the sector to meet the standards. We know that not all the properties will be able to meet the standards. When you look at, let me see if this is the slide. Yep, that is in terms of ISH as well. So again, it's a clear trend, upward trend. And I was looking at this is the one. No, let me see. It's the next slide. Sorry that I need to make the screen bigger. Yeah, that's an interesting one in terms of showing you abeyances, failures, and exemptions. Does anybody want to share anything in relation to that? Any struggles you have? Any pertinent comments? We know that exemptions, are more to do with the fabric of the building, that you won't be able to meet it, while abeyances are different. It's more like social reasons for which you can't meet the standards. So we move on then. Emergency repairs, overall, landlords are completing emergency repairs quicker. Again, it's really, really good to see that. For non-emergency repairs, it's slightly different. It's RSLs are able to do them slightly quicker in the last reporting year, and for LAs it's just going up. But again, the graphic shows perhaps a more pronounced, upward and downward trend. But when we are looking at the numbers, when we are looking at the figures, LAs are well within 11 days. And RSLs is just over 7 days. So it's really good in terms of service. Whether that relates directly with the perception that tenants have for repairs is different, and that's interesting to see why landlords are doing all they can, but overall in terms of tenants' perception, perhaps the impact is more limited, and tenant satisfaction can be affected by other factors. In terms of repairs right first time, again, little variances. I wouldn't say it's anything significant. The next one. And that's what I was saying. In terms of repairs satisfaction, there is a decline in the perception that tenants have with satisfaction for repairs. We've seen from your comments as well that some of you have had to use transactional surveys for this, and for others it's been when they're doing the full tenant satisfaction survey. Would you have any comments as to why this can be happening? Why satisfaction with repairs has gone down slightly? I don't have a graph here that shows you, but there's some variances, but across the sector in general, it's just happening. No comments? Good. Okay, let me just.
There's a comment now, Max.
Yeah. I'm just reading. Yeah, sometimes communications, provision of information, and in general, I think the cost of living, rent increases, all that can alter tenants' perception, although it influences satisfaction in general. Thank you.
I think in previous years, the satisfaction had dropped, and landlords were telling us it was because of contractors' problems trying to get contractors, and also the cost of materials and stuff. I'm wondering if that's still an issue, if people have seen that improved.
That's what I was wondering as well, whether you have experienced anything that has affected your service. How are things in general with sourcing contractors and materials? We know that has been a challenge, especially also for small organizations. No. Gas safety. It's the performance here has improved, so there are less failures in meeting gas safety obligations. The next slide shows again that there might be one or two organizations that had a significant number of failures, as it also happened last year. Last year it was in particular one local authority that had a hiccup, and this year is the other way around. This year is an RSL that recorded the highest number of failures in meeting gas safety obligations. Let me just see if I can, Trudy. Yeah. Yeah, Trudy, it's, mentioning how for those rural or those organizations based in the islands is very difficult to meet repairs and get gas safe engineers. I believe you don't have mains gas there, Trudy, do you? So yeah, it's yeah. Thank you. I'm reading the comments as well. Cost of materials, etc. It says retaining staff in repairs. This has all had an impact on what can be delivered compared to previous years. Perhaps this is a factor in the decrease overall. Also, the focus on other priorities for organizations such as damp and mold and meeting net zero targets may be impacted routine repairs more than anticipated. Thank you for that, Anna. So these comments are useful because then they help us understand the data. So I don't see any huge, big jumps. So because the variations are small, it's just interesting to understand if there is anything that has significantly changed or not, what you think could be contributing to those variations. So I shall move on to access to housing. Turnover has increased very marginally for local authorities, but not for RSL, so it's pretty stable. It is not a big turnover. The caveat here again is this is not good or bad performance. It's just what is happening. So if there is low turnover, it's probably good for the tenants. It's good for tenancy sustainment. But in terms of homeless, for example, it's not good for them. So, but it is what it is. Now, looking at turnover, when we look at offers refused, I thought it was interesting that, and I don't have an answer, but I would be quite keen to hear your thoughts on the slide here. Why do you think that perhaps, well, not perhaps, why do you think that RSLs are seeing more offers refused. Have you had as an RSL anything different happening in the last reporting year, or it could be purely a coincidental thing, but is there anything that might be affecting that you're seeing an increase in refusals? Give you some time to think about that, or we can discuss it later, at the end of the presentation.
Here's a comment, Max.
Yeah. Now it says paying more attention to these recording reasons, drop-down split by category relating to property or applicant. Okay, so you're paying more attention to that, which is interesting. What I would say is this indicator in particular has been dropped from the charter. So for this reporting year, landlords will not be asked to report on offers refused. Now, last year, SHN proposed to continue collecting this indicator for our annual network indicators. Since, you're already collecting it if you wanted to continue, because personally, I think it is interesting to see that, because then you can see your turnover, you can see refusals. And if you, like Bianca, are paying a wee bit more attention and trying to record the reasons, that might be useful to keep, if you so wish, to report on these for our annual network indicators. Ross was telling me that when we consulted last year, the overall feeling was that landlords said, no, we just shouldn't record that for the network indicators. I wonder whether you now think we should continue recording that or reporting that in the annual network indicators. Not all of the organizations, not all the members will send us the data for the network indicators, but we do have quite a good number. So I think it's useful. What do you think about that? Let me just see. Yeah, Shirley says yes. Gary, high level of refusals in relation to Section 5 nominations over the past year, working collaboratively with LAs to improve nomination process. We will continue to review refusals and reasons internally. We need to know where we can influence them. Good. So what I don't need a definite answer now, but what we're going to be doing for the next annual network indicators, we're going to be consulting on modifying some of the indicators, and maybe what we could propose is consult on retaining this one. I think that the split has or might change, but it might be useful just even like as a top level, offers refuse indicator, just to retain it for the network indicators. Let's to homeless. I think a very mild increase. Let me just, sorry, before moving to let's to homeless is another comment. Anne Jenkins is saying that for them, it's about the desirability of the older stock. Their stock is 70% one bedroom and bedsit, old tenements. Yeah. People's choices and expectations are changing. Interesting to see that you feel that some of you may be overly recording offers. Yeah. It's complicated, the situation in Aberdeen. Thank you. Are there bigger discrepancies relating to CBLs or non-CBLs allocation policies? Well, that's good for a discussion, perhaps, but not at this stage. But we're going to keep that one. I don't think that might be pertinent, Lisa, but we are going to be doing a forum later this month that will feature, among other things, allocations. So that
Yeah,
might
we're
be,
going to be doing a housing management forum, but that's more based on how medical points are assessed, Max. But maybe that's another one for a future discussion,
yeah,
because obviously there's so much
Yeah.
to allocations. But I think you're right in some of the previous comments. People's aspirations are higher now as well. I remember when we used to allocate houses when I was a housing officer. If someone got a flat, they were expecting the new build flat. They weren't expecting the old tenement that was next to it. So yeah, I think it's a lot to do with aspirations as well.
yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your comments. Let's to homeless. The sector is working hard to allocate properties to homeless people. The percentages haven't shifted very much for RSLs. I believe there was an aspiration of a 50%, allocations to homeless people. That is not happening yet. Are there anything that might be affecting allocations to homeless people? Are they prioritized? I'm sure they are, obviously, but can the sector do anything to help address this? I know it's a difficult question. I think there's a straight answer, but I just wanted to open that for discussion if anyone had any comments in relation to Let's to Homeless. Gary, you mentioned something about, Section 5 referrals, there's a high level of refusals in your case for Section 5 nominations over the past year. So that was interesting.
Yeah, on that one, Max, I think we've kind of found that there was a higher turnover last year and more Let's to Homeless persons, but we're kind of finding applicants were coming through to us at times without knowing they'd been nominated to the association or knew much about it. And there was kind of different areas between ourselves and Stirling Council. So some of the work to improve it is based around kind of straightforward administrative processes, which has been kind of helpful. And the guys I'm working with at Stirling Council are actually really open to adapting their sort of processes to kind of help the work that we're doing. So that collaborative working is going well, and we're kind of hoping over this year that some of the changes we've made, and the council themselves are moving from, for example, homeless applicants having 2 offers to only having 1, because I think a lot of that refusals we were receiving was in relation to that. So we're hoping that process improvement will just kind of help overall, particularly given we're now allocating more of our Let's to Homeless applicants.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Any other comments in relation?
2 or 3 comments in the chat.
Let's have a look at that. Would you read them out loud for us,
Yeah,
Lisa?
sure. So Bianca says we operate in almost all local authorities in Scotland. Not all give us referrals, so target not achievable in all local authorities. William says we agree. Percentage of homeless let targets with RSLs as part of their annual lettings plan. LSVT authority. And Shirley says we have a really low number of Section 5 referrals currently reviewing the process.
Good. Okay. Yeah, Brian Pearson. Yeah, so that Brian is saying that they moved from Section 5, simply bidding via CBL, to us also matching void properties to Section 5s and bidding first, but then we will match from our Section 5 list and then go to the LA. This is increasing our Section 5 number so far. Brilliant, good, thank you. It's interesting for us to know what is happening, because then that helps us, understand things better, especially when we're doing more deeper comparisons and when we're looking at performance. I find sometimes it's really good to look at the performance in the sector, but it is so top level that what is happening in one area or for organizations at a particular size is different, really. And then for these type of presentations, we have to put everything, in the same bag. So this is someone else. Alan Sim says we are piloting a move away from Section 5 referrals to allowing homeless applicants to apply directly for properties. We have a quota system for allocations. This allows the homeless applicants to bid for properties to bid for properties they are interested in and hopefully lead to improved tenancy sustainment. Good. And having Anne Jenkins, having recently moved from an RSL that covered 29 local authorities, we were seeing those where housing emergency had been declared. We saw longer wait times for nominations on Section 5s and much more refusals. Many more. I felt like the LAs became so busy dealing with the emergency that the day-to-day processes fell away a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Anne.
Robert Murray had his hand up there. I don't know if you still want to ask your question, Robert.
Oh, Robert, yeah.
Yeah, it was just to just point out what we're doing at Dunbritton, Max. We've actually had applicant-led. I'm sort of split between two authorities, and I also deal with a CHR. So I get Section 5 from one local authority, and I use the CHR for nominations for the other part of the authority. But what I've actually done with the Section 5s, it was applicant-led, and what we've actually done is changed it to void-led. But what I'm finding is my officers are emailing, it's West Dunbartonshire Council, who it's predominantly 2 and 3 bedrooms, so 3-4 apartment houses. That's the majority of our stock with most RSLs. But what they're saying is they need the 1 bedrooms and the sort of 5 and 6 bedrooms. So the 3 and 4s, they've not got the demand for that just now. So where we're actually offering up properties for them, they're not obviously taking it, but we're still offering the property. So we're trying to alleviate the housing emergency as much as possible, but obviously we don't have the right stock. So it's like measuring apples and oranges. It's just not working. Obviously we need to look at the stock profiles, but for an association to change their stock profiles, that's going to be quite a job and quite costly. So I don't know what the answer to this is.
That's good. Good comments. It's really interesting to hear your comments and read your comments as well. And again, it shows how different organizations are. Martin Nicol is also saying that they have a lot of supported accommodation that homeless people don't qualify for, and that skews their rates. So that's again interesting. Alana Dernin says higher acquisition funding for larger homes would help. Good. Noted. The information we give to the ARC is on Section 5, but doesn't include the lets to young care leavers, duty to corporates, etc. But that's a fair point. A key challenge will be availability of suitable size stock with 85% requirement for 1 beds, which also highest general needs group requirement. Could deliver more smaller 1 beds through SHIP process, but not always viable due to grant restrictions at 89% of Scottish Government grant for 1 beds. Good. Brilliant. Well, thank you for your comments. We'll move on. I think it was Alan who said, yeah, that they have this bidding, system that allows applicants to bid for properties, and hoping that will improve tenancy sustainment. So I think it's interesting because we're going to move on to tenancy sustainment. When you look at the next slide, you see that tenancy sustainment has dropped for RSL. So this indicator is looking at the percentage of tenancies that began in the previous reporting year and that they stayed or they remain more than a year overall. So for local authorities, there's been a slight, increase in sustainment, but for RSLs, a decrease. Again, the graph shows like a big drop, but when you're looking that we are, from 91.35 to 89.99, so we're talking about barely 1 point. And on the contrary, looking at sustainment for homeless applicants, which is the next slide, the sustainment rates have increased, which is, it's good. Any thoughts on that, or I think we've discussed that a bit when we were talking about homeless lets? Yeah, so I'll move on to the next slide, which is abandonments and evictions. Very stable performance in terms of RSLs, a very marginal increase. Yeah, in relation to sustainment, Shirley Ritchie, she feels that it's not the greatest indicators because there are positive and negative reasons for ending a tenancy, and of course, it's just an indicator, and really the nuances and the factors, you know. Totally agree, Shirley. And again, medical adaptations indicator, it's it is what it is. What I find sometimes is whether I question whether everyone is recorded information the same way for this indicator. I see when looking at data that there are great discrepancies in how things are interpreted for these indicators on medical adaptations. But the average days to complete medical adaptations is higher for RSLs than for LAs. This indicator also will look at there will be medical adaptations that would have perhaps received or started at one reporting year, and then they carry forward to the following reporting year. So you look at the whole time that it took you to do that. So sometimes it doesn't correlate with the number of medical adaptations received in one reporting year. If I'm clear in what I'm trying to say, I find it very difficult. I hope you can be forbearing with me, because this is my first big presentation like this to an audience like you, and I so much prefer to speak in person and to see my audience and engage with you in person. So I feel I'm talking to the screen, and I find that a bit off-putting. I suppose I will get used to that. So hopefully the next one I do, and when I do one next year, I will be much better. But I know you're paying attention, but I don't know whether sometimes I'm clear in the way I'm explaining things, because obviously I cannot see your reactions or your faces, and if you're nodding or you're thinking, what is he talking about? So that's what I was trying to say. You know, the percentage of approved applications that are completed, sometimes it doesn't relate too well with the length of time to complete medical adaptation. So you can have an application that has more than one medical adaptation, for instance. And this one, perhaps, again, it just shows you the table in particular, looks at average cost and the average day to complete adaptations. So for RSLs, it takes them as an average a little bit longer to complete these adaptations, and it costs a little bit more to them than for local authorities. And again, I take that with a pinch of salt, because it's just for last year. It will depend on a number of factors, the type of adaptations. You know, you're comparing here installing a handrail with a wet floor shower, a bathroom conversion, or things like that are much more complex. And I'm just towards the end. I think these are interesting slides. I'm going to try to move on now to average rent
nice
increase.
Supportive comments in the chat for you, Max.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will read them, carefully after that. Yeah. So Trudy says a rent is her favorite bit. Average rent increases. That again is showing you overall LAs have had lower rent levels, and now have had to apply higher rent increases. For RSLs, rent increase levels are coming down a little bit from the previous year. What I am going to be trying to do is to see whether we can include some additional, at least one additional indicator on rent increases for the annual network indicators. So after I consult you, we are thinking maybe to ask if you can to provide average weekly rents with rent increases for the annual network indicators that will then allow us to do interesting comparisons. But I'm not going to go into that just now, but hopefully that will also help you, Trudy, with this indicator that you like for rents. Yes, thank you, Lisa. If we could put the cameras on, yes, at the end of the discussions, you know. And what we can do, if you prefer, is we could end the recording at the end of the presentation and we can have a discussion that is not recorded if you find that useful. But I'm going to move on to the next one. In terms of the percentage average weekly rents increase to be applied next year. So again, it's looking at an average. So you can see that this year, the average rent increase for LAs was overall higher than for RSLs. Any questions, any thoughts on that? Should we move on? Move on to rent collection. So the sector is doing really good. LAs are performing really well as well in collecting rent. And overall, you know, there's an increase in rent collection. So it's not very much to be said in relation to that indicator as well. In terms of rent arrears as well, improvements, great improvements for both in keeping them lower, helping tenants manage. I give you a few seconds to have a look at that if you have any questions, any comments. Former tenants arrears is a slightly different picture for local authorities. An increase there, but again, it's a marginal increase.
Should just put a comment in, Max,
Trudy,
saying
yes.
obviously evictions have restarted as well.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. That could have an impact. Looking at the slide that we just showed you in terms of evictions, the number, although they have restarted, but it is not something that the number of evictions has increased dramatically. But it is there, so it will have an impact. For former tenant arrears as well, you see that the
Put a
levels have
comment in as
increased.
well, Max. Can you see it?
Yes, so
Yeah.
but this is former tenant arrears. So Max, that is the current arrears. I-27 is the ARC indicator, 27 is gross arrears.
You were showing the current arrears, which is fine, but
Was I?
the actual indicator for the ARC return is gross arrears, because I was looking at it because we're
You're right.
yeah, so it should be minutes. There's no, when I was like crikey, because we were usually
Yeah.
better than the average RSLs
Yes.
and average
So-
LAs for that one. I was quite pricey. So, but that's current arrears, which isn't I-27. That's a network indicator.
Yeah. So I should
That's all.
that's not labeled correctly. Let me just bear that.
I mean, it's correct. I mean, the current arrears is correct, but it's just not I-27. I'd just like to know what the gross arrears averages are for the actual ARC indicator.
No, but this is not. Sorry, are you saying this is a network indicator?
Yes, I-27. Well, what you've got is current arrears, which you collect as a network, and we send you through. But the gross arrears, which is reported to the regulator, is at I-27. Is the gross arrears rent indicator is you don't have that up on screen. I-27 should say gross arrears, so it should be, which includes other aspects of the arrears, because that's just current you've got, which is not an ARC indicator.
No, but
It's usually current, former, and then I think the gross one comes.
Yes, that's
after.
correct.
I think it's another slide along.
Is that right? Okay, but it says
No,
says I-27 current.
No, but I think that has been labeled incorrectly, I would think. that is gross arrears, and I just said current arrears because it's just right there. But you're right. But that's a chartered indicator, it's not a network indicator. So that should
What
be
you're
the
saying?
gross.
Sorry, you're saying that the current the gross arrears is for average around 6%. That's not right.
No, they
For
are both
local authority?
they are both I-27. They're all I-27. So you're right in terms of you supply former arrears and gross arrears, and then you also supply I-27 current arrears as a network indicator. But in the charter, it's actually a calculated one and they're all I-27.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, I know that. So is this the actual? That's what I'm querying. Is that it seems quite low, for if this is the gross total 5.49 for local authorities. That seems quite low.
No, but
Ours are good
that-
listening, and I'll get back to you, Paul. Thank you.
yeah, we look into that, but that should be current. As I said, we calculated. But yeah,
Max, I totally get what you're saying, Max, but the actual ARC indicator, the definition is gross rent arrears, all tenants as at 31st of March each year as a percentage of rent due for the reporting year. Now, I take it, I appreciate you've got the current arrears up there as a figure, but it's you need to label it correctly. I-27 is gross arrears. And and the reason I'm saying this is that it seems a very low average for local authorities. I don't know what the RSLs are. The local authority average of 5.49 is very low. I was thinking it's more about 8 or 9% for the local authority average.
Max, do you have the gross arrears in one of your other slides further on?
No.
It's also marked I-27? No. Right, okay.
Well, no, actually, yes, we do. So let me just check. Yes, we do. So that's
Right, that's the gross arrears. That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. 8.86 seems more in tune with what we've been seeing over the past few years.
Yeah. So that's the gross arrears. So the other one, it was a calculated indicator to show current and former, and then you're looking at gross. Yeah. So we need to look. We'll check the figures, but we check them and they were fine. It's just we need to look at the labeling in a way that is clearer, and this is really helpful. As I said, this is the first time I've done this presentation based on what was there, and sometimes if something might be obvious to me, but it is not really, and that's why I need your feedback and you to challenge and to say, look, I don't understand that or that. So by all means, after the event, I'm going to post a feedback form as well. So be honest with your feedback, because that really helps. In being very new in this role, I mean, I've been with SHN for probably, it's just 2 months. So, and this is the first presentation I've done like this. It's a lot of information and a very limited time for us to process and all that. So we want to make sure that it's very clear and that it's accurate. And sometimes it's just maybe explaining how we got there or labeling things correctly. But are you happy with that one? With the grocery?
That's what I was saying. It was fine. It was just the labeling, Max. I mean, it's like I-27 is. I'm not okay. I'm being a pedant, but that's my nature. I-27 is quite clearly states as the percentage of gross rent arrears due, etc., etc. It doesn't refer to current arrears, and that's where the confusion lies. I would think I would stick to when you're talking about the ARC indicators. When we report them to our tenants, we have to be quite specific in saying here is what the wording is. And I've had discussions with various comms people about this. That's another matter. So I would just say the same is that for current arrears, that's a network indicator, and it should be you should maybe categorise. I'm not teaching granny, so just say this is a network indicator, and I appreciate that gross and former, current and former make up the gross arrears, but that's just what the regulator wants.
Yeah.
So it's just the labelling. Everything else is fine. It's just the labelling. I'm sorry, I'm being portrayed here as a bad guy, but anyway.
No, you're not. On the contrary, that really helps me. It helps me a lot, because I need you to look at things with a magnifying glass and look at things like that. That, as I said, I might not see, not picked up. So this is good because I'm taking notes and we make sure that it's crystal clear. Even I think maybe showing this slide that shows the gross arrears first, and then if necessary, we could do a split and say this is our calculation. That might be better.
I was going to say that, Max, and maybe the other one needs to be an N indicator, so you can see it's a network indicator. It's maybe just been copied over wrong or whatever. That's fine.
That's what Shirley's saying as well. Perhaps show that slide first. You're totally right. So so we'll take that on board. That's an easy fix, and we can label that better. So that's great. Thank you. Let's move on to the arrears that have been written off. So there was, well, there's been higher writes-off this year in the last reporting year for both RSLs and LAs. As you can see, local authorities have always been, you know, historically more what's the word? Circumspect, you know, or they have the write-off perhaps less as a percentage than LAs, but overall, you know, it's an increasing percentage of arrears written off in the last reporting year. I'll move on to relay times. Average relay times are decreasing or for RSLs and increasing for LAs. If you want to offer any thoughts on that, feel free, or we can move on. Again, it's an increasing trend, and we can talk about a trend definitely for LAs and a decreasing trend for RSLs.
Yeah, that's actually quite. Sorry, Max, I didn't put my hand up. So it's Paul McLean again. I mean, that's actually quite interesting because we've actually, for the past 4 or 5 years, we've been sort of bucking the trend with that, and we're now down to 37 days as a local authority for average relay times. I think it's because we've had a concerted effort into looking at the whole VOI process and a dedicated single voice team that's sort of addressing that, because this came out after the pandemic, and because as everybody was pretty much in the same boat. It was that, you know, the relay times was atrocious, and it was just a pure direct focus into actually the whole system and how we relay it and getting things turned around quicker, and to various other initiatives to improve sort of refusal rates as well. Refusal rates have improved very slightly, but also getting people into these properties. So I think it was the work of a single voice team that's got us down to about 37 days, which is the best we've ever been in this, actually, which is quite interesting.
Well,
I'll be actually interested to see the graph when you come and do a PAV to see if we're top of the league when it comes to local authorities, because I don't think we ever have been.
Oh, that's good. Well, and again, that's why I find these presentations useful, but to a degree, because we're putting everything in one big bag. While what I can tell you, for example, that we had returns from 28 local authorities. So although it looks all local authorities, you know, there is an increasing trend of, you know, increasing the relay times, but out of those 28 local authorities that submitted data, 15 of them have seen a reduction in their relay times in comparison with the previous years. And 6 local authorities have relay time averages that are lower than RSLs. So maybe you're one of them. So but then obviously when you put all the 28 local authorities that submitted data to us, that is what is showing. With that caveat, you know, that for 15 local authorities that gave us data, they're doing better. They're reducing their relay times, and 6 local authorities have relay times that are below the RSL averages. So there's a lot of work being done by local authorities to address.
So in some respects, you're saying then that, you know, the fact that it's increasing up to 86 is we've got some particular outliers, saying you know, there's maybe some with, you know, a significant, you know, long days, average days. So there'll be outliers that are skewing.
Yeah.
So I mean that was obviously the excuse we used to use as well, or the reason we used to use for if performance wasn't so good, we'd say, well, it was outliers that caused that as well. But that is significant with on indicators like this, if there are particular outliers that can, you know, skew a trend and make it look worse than what it actually is. Because there was initially years ago, well, just after the pandemic and a few years after, issues with you know, utility companies, and there still are issues with utility companies and issues with getting contractors and materials.
Definitely. And that can also be said for other indicators. you know, although for this one probably is more pronounced, the differences, so you can see that, but you will be able to do those comparisons as well, and we'll be able to do that if we do your PAV, but also using our tools, you can see also in terms of tenant satisfaction and things like that, you can see that there are some organizations that have experienced, you know, huge, you know, variances, and they will affect the overall percentages and indicators, you know, for the sector. Void rent loss, it sort of mirrors what we saw before in terms of performance. Obviously, if you have higher relet times, you will have a higher loss, and the other way around. So it's not much that can be said about this. But again, all that we said about you know, the outliers and looking at the sector and then looking at organizations individually is very pertinent.
There's a comment from Martin, Max, saying Aberdeen City is definitely an outlier.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention any organizations, but you know, but yes, you'll be able to see it. All this data is available to members, so any member can go and just, we encourage you just to use the tools to look at those things, and I'm sure you're already doing it. So much that this is useful to look at the whole sector. The best thing is just to look at your own organization and look at your own context and compare yourself with, you know, peers and relevant organizations. One of the things I wanted to show you, and this is the last slide, so it's something that we are, well, it's not the last slide, but it's just the end of the last few slides are just about publicity, you know, but this is just a test just to show you some of the comparisons we might be looking. Whether that will be useful or not, we will need to see with yourself. But when you look at indicators in a very, very granular level, you know, you can look at some things that might be related or might not. So if, for example, when the percentage of tenants satisfied with the opportunities given them to participate is above 99, naturally the perception on value for money increases. So that kind of comparisons might help us if we apply this sort of method to other indicators. So we are looking at that. I do not want to raise expectations, and this is not like a magic tool, but we are looking at doing comparisons at a more granular level that might be useful, you know, for other indicators in the future. So although we are working in processing the data and working with the charge data, we're also looking at doing other interesting comparisons, and then maybe just producing a report or doing some sort of forum and discussing with you if you find that useful, or if you would like us to do additional comparisons that perhaps we haven't done before. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so what we can do now is we are going to stop recording, and then we could have a discussion all together. And just remind you before do that, we have a great membership offer, you know, for the membership fee that you invest in us. We give you all that. We give you different communities of practice. We are doing this year, I think we had a record of organizations that had their data validated. So I have done, oh, can't remember how many now, it's just under 40, but you know, so I did the desktop data validation, and that's where sometimes I see the way that data is recorded. Well, like when we were talking, Paul, about complaints and how what some organizations record as complaints or not, you know, it's interesting to see that there are variances in the way things are done. And Ross, our head of consultancy and validation, he's also doing and offering a tremendous service in you know, doing bespoke validations, looking at your data, looking at what goes behind your data, the systems that you're using, and how you're following, you know, the guidance that we have on how to record data. So I think that's a very valuable service. If you've never done that, if you would consider that, I think it's very beneficial to have that done. And you know, also we offer communities of practice. So these are the list of the communities of practices we have. So that groups people together around the area or or the topics that they work with. So if you join one or more of these communities of practice, then we're able to send you reminders, invitations for events, for sessions, consultations. So we keep you up to date about what is happening around those different communities of practice.
Max, we're not
So-
seeing the community of practices.
Oh no, I'm looking
Your
at things in
slide.
my.
And also Trudy's just added a final comment. It would be interesting to see value for money against investment in stock and stock condition.
Okay, good point. So we're working in relation to that as well, and affordability as well. So we'll get back in touch about that. But we will be launching next month in July. I'm going to be sending you an invitation, and we're going to be talking about our value for money tool and what it does. So if you could come along, or some of your staff could come along, and then you can participate in providing us some additional data to look at value for money, that again will be very useful. And certainly investment in stock and stock condition, that's a good point, Trudy. Thank you very much. So I'm going to stop presenting now. You know who we are, so let me just stop my presentation. And Lisa, if you want to stop recording, and then if you want to stay behind